I never thought much about mirrors before that trip to New Orleans. They were just things you glanced at to make sure your hair wasn't sticking up weird or there wasn't spinach in your teeth. But after what happened in that antique shop on Magazine Street, I can't look at my own reflection without my skin crawling. It started because of Chloe. Chloe with her laugh that sounded like wind chimes and her way of making everything feel like an adventure. We'd been friends since college, the kind of friends who almost dated a dozen times but never quite made it happen. There was always something there, this current between us that neither of us ever fully acknowledged, though I thought about it more than I'd ever admit. We were in New Orleans for a long weekend, just getting away from the grind of our jobs back in Chicago. I worked in logistics. She was a graphic designer. We'd booked a cute little Airbnb in the Garden District, and we spent our first day just wandering, drinking sugary coffee and eating beignets that left powdered sugar fingerprints on everything we touched. I remember watching Chloe as we walked, the way her sundress, this pale yellow thing with little flowers on it, clung to her hips when the humid breeze caught it. She had these incredible legs, tan and strong from all her yoga classes, and I found myself staring at the way her calf muscles flexed with each step on the uneven pavement. There was a delicate silver anklet around her right ankle that I'd never noticed before, and I found myself wondering what it would feel like to trace it with my finger. "Look at this place," she said, stopping suddenly and grabbing my arm. We were standing outside this narrow, cluttered-looking shop called Reflections Through Time. The window was packed with mirrors of all shapes and sizes, ornate gilded ones, simple wooden-framed ones, even some that looked like they belonged in a funhouse. The glass was old, wavy in places, and everything had that faintly dusty look that antique shops always seem to have. "Let's go in," Chloe said, already pulling me toward the door. "I've been looking for a full-length mirror for my bedroom." The bell above the door chimed with a flat, tinny sound as we stepped inside. The air was cool and still, smelling of old wood and lemon polish. Mirrors covered every available surface, hanging on walls, leaning against furniture, even stacked in corners. That it felt like being watched by 1,000 silent eyes. An old man stood behind a cluttered counter at the back of the shop, polishing a small hand mirror with a soft cloth. He looked up as we entered, his eyes pale and watery behind thick glasses. He didn't smile, just gave us a slow nod before returning to his polishing. "Creepy," Chloe whispered, her hand still on my arm. I could feel the warmth of her fingers through my shirt sleeve. We began browsing, moving slowly through the cramped aisles. Every time I turned, I caught glimpses of us in the mirrors, fragmented, multiplied, distorted by the old glass. Chloe would pause occasionally, checking her reflection, smoothing her hair, adjusting the strap of her dress where it had slipped off her shoulder. I tried not to stare at the way the fabric tightened across her chest when she did this. Then I saw him. In one of the larger mirrors, an ornate thing with carved flowers winding around its edges, I saw a man standing behind us. Just for a second, reflected in the glass, that he was tall and thin, dressed in a dark suit that looked too heavy for the New Orleans heat. His hair was black and slicked back from a pale face. I turned around, expecting to see him standing there in the shop with us, but the aisle was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, he was gone. "Did you see that?" I asked Chloe. "See what?" She was examining a small Art Deco mirror, holding it up to see how it looked. "Nothing," I said. "Thought I saw someone." The bell on the door chimed again, and this time when I turned, there he was, the man from the mirror. He stood just inside the doorway, blinking slowly as his eyes adjusted to the dim light of the shop. He was even paler than I had thought, his skin almost translucent. He didn't look at us, just moved slowly toward a collection of mirrors along the far wall. There was something wrong with the way he moved. Not exactly stiff, but deliberate, like he was thinking through every motion before making it. "Check this out," Chloe said, pulling my attention back to her. She was standing in front of a full-length mirror with a dark wooden frame. "What do you think?" "You look great," I said automatically, though I was only half looking at the mirror. My eyes kept drifting toward the pale man across the shop. "Not me, silly," she laughed. "The mirror. Do you think it would look good in my bedroom?" I forced myself to focus on her reflection. Chloe stood with one hip slightly cocked, her head tilted as she examined the mirror's frame. The yellow dress hugged her body in all the right places, and for a moment I let myself imagine what it would be like to see her like this every morning, sleep rumpled and warm in bed, standing in front of her mirror as she got ready for the day. Then I noticed in the reflection. Chloe was standing just slightly to the left of where she actually stood. Maybe 2 or 3 inches off. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dim light. But no, when I looked at the real Chloe then back at her reflection, there was definitely a discrepancy. "Does this mirror look weird to you?" I asked. Chloe frowned at her reflection. "Weird how?" "I don't know. The reflection seems off." She studied herself, turning side to side. "Looks fine to me. Maybe it's the glass, it's probably old." The pale man was closer now, examining a collection of small hand mirrors on a table nearby. That he didn't look at us, but I had the uncomfortable feeling that he was aware of us, very aware. "Can I help you find something?" the shopkeeper asked, suddenly appearing beside us. I jumped slightly. I hadn't heard him approach. Chloe smiled at him. "I'm looking for a bedroom mirror, something full length." The old man's eyes drifted over to the pale man, then back to us. "That one you're looking at is from the 1920s. Solid mahogany. The glass is original." "It's beautiful," Chloe said. "But it's a little more than I wanted to spend." The shopkeeper nodded slowly. "We have some less expensive options toward the back." He gestured with a hand that trembled slightly. As we followed him deeper into the shop, I glanced back at the pale man. He was watching us now, his head tilted at an angle that didn't look quite natural. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The back of the shop was even more crowded than the front, with mirrors leaning against every surface. It felt like being in a maze of reflections. Everywhere I looked, I saw fragments of Chloe and myself, multiplied and distorted. "Here," the shopkeeper said, gesturing to a simpler floor mirror with a plain wooden frame. "This one is from the 1950s. The glass is newer, replaced in the 80s. Chloe examined it, looking at her reflection from different angles. "I like this one. What do you think, Mark?" I was only half paying attention. The pale man had followed us to the back of the shop. He wasn't looking at mirrors anymore. He was just standing there watching us, his hands hung limp at his sides. "Mark?" Chloe prompted. "Sorry," I said, tearing my eyes away from the man. "Yeah, it looks good." The shopkeeper named a price that seemed reasonable, and Chloe agreed to take it. As he began writing up the receipt, I turned back to where the pale man had been standing. He was gone. "Did you see where that guy went?" I asked Chloe. "What guy?" "The pale guy in the suit. He was just here." She shook her head. "I didn't see anyone. Maybe he left." But I hadn't heard the bell on the door chime. The shop was silent except for the scratch of the shopkeeper's pen on paper. We paid for the mirror and arranged to have it shipped back to Chicago. As we were leaving, the shopkeeper looked at me with those watery eyes and said, "Be careful with mirrors, they don't always show you what's really there." It was the kind of thing that would sound cheesy in a movie, but standing in that cluttered shop with the weight of all those silent reflections around us, it felt genuinely unsettling. The bell chimed as we stepped back out into the humid New Orleans afternoon. The sunlight felt suddenly bright and harsh after the dim interior of the shop. "Well, that was interesting," Chloe said as we walked back toward our Airbnb. "That shopkeeper was kind of creepy." "Yeah," I said, still thinking about the pale man. "Did you really not see that other guy? Tall, pale, dark suit?" She shook her head. "Sorry that I was focused on the mirrors." She bumped her hip against mine playfully. "You're not going all spooky on me, are you? This is New Orleans, you're supposed to save the ghost stories for the vampire tours." I forced a smile. "Yeah, you're right. Probably just my imagination." But that night, as I lay in bed in the little guest room of our Airbnb, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The room had a large mirror on the wall opposite the bed, and I found myself staring at it in the dim light filtering through the window. My reflection looked back at me, familiar and normal. Then I blinked, and for just a second I thought I saw movement behind my reflection. A pale face, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. I sat up, my heart pounding. The room was empty. The mirror showed only my own startled expression. It was just my mind playing tricks, I told myself. suggestion from being in that weird shop all afternoon that I lay back down and eventually fell into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of multiplied reflections, all of them slightly wrong. The next day we did the typical New Orleans tourist things, ate gumbo, listened to jazz in Jackson Square, browsed the French market that I tried to put the mirror shop out of my mind, but it lingered at the edges of my thoughts like a persistent itch. Chloe was in a particularly good mood, her laughter coming easily as we sampled pralines and watched street performers. She'd worn a sleeveless top and shorts that showed off her tan legs, and I found my eyes drawn to the way the muscles in her thighs flexed as she walked, the delicate bones of her ankles visible above her sandals. There was a moment when we were sitting on a bench watching the riverboats on the Mississippi, and she leaned her head against my shoulder that I could smell her shampoo, something with coconut, and feel the warmth of her skin through my shirt. My hand itched to rest on her knee to feel the smooth skin there. But I didn't. We'd been friends for too long, and crossing that line felt like risking something I wasn't sure I was ready to lose. That's when I saw him again. Across the street, standing perfectly still amidst the crowd of tourists, was the pale man from the mirror shop. He was still wearing that dark suit, despite the oppressive heat. He wasn't looking at the river or the street performers. He was looking directly at us. "Chloe," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "Oh?" She didn't lift her head from my shoulder. "Look across the street. By the hot dog cart. Do you see him?" She sat up and followed my gaze. The hot dog cart was there, but the space beside it was empty now. "See who?" she asked. "He was just there, the guy from yesterday." She gave me a concerned look. "Mark, are you okay? You've been jumpy since we left that shop." "I'm fine," I said, but I wasn't. My palms were sweating, and there was a cold knot in my stomach. We spent the rest of the day sightseeing, but I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning crowds for that pale face. I didn't see him again, but the feeling of being watched persisted. That night, we decided to go out for drinks on Frenchman Street. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of spilled beer and cigar smoke. Music spilled out of every doorway, jazz, blues, zydeco. We found a place with live music and squeezed into a small table near the back. Chloe ordered us hurricanes, and when they arrived in their tall, curvy glasses, she clinked hers against mine. "To New Orleans," she said, her eyes sparkling in the dim light. "To New Orleans," I echoed. The alcohol warmed my veins and loosened the knot of anxiety that had been tightening in my stomach all day. I found myself watching the way Chloe's lips touched the rim of her glass, the way her throat moved as she swallowed. She caught me looking and smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made heat bloom in my chest. The band played a slow, smoky blues number, and couples began to drift onto the small dance floor. "Dance with me," Chloe said, standing and holding out her hand. "I'm not much of a dancer, but I took her hand and let her lead me to the floor." She moved close, her body fitting against mine in a way that felt both familiar and thrillingly new. I could feel the warmth of her through our clothes, the solid reality of her hips under my hands. She rested her head on my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. My heart was pounding, and it wasn't just from the dancing or the alcohol. This was it, I thought. The moment we'd been circling around for years. I could feel the possibility of it hanging between us, electric and terrifying. Then I saw him, through the crowd, reflected in the mirror behind the bar, stood the pale man. He wasn't in the room with us, I was certain of that. But there he was in the reflection, watching us dance. His head was tilted at that unnatural angle, his dark eyes fixed on us. I stiffened, my hands tightening on Chloe's hips. "What's wrong?" she murmured, not lifting her head. "Nothing," I said, but my voice was strained. I kept my eyes on the mirror, watching as the reflection of the pale man slowly raised one hand and pointed, not at me but at Chloe. Then a waiter passed in front of the mirror, and when he moved away, the pale man was gone. "I need some air," I said, pulling away from Chloe. Outside, the humid night air felt heavy in my lungs. I leaned against the brick wall of the building, trying to calm my racing heart. Chloe followed me out. "Mark, what is going on with you? You've been acting weird since yesterday." "I keep seeing him," I said. "The man from the mirror shop. He's everywhere." She put a hand on my arm. "Maybe you're just tired. Or maybe the heat's getting to you." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was flushed from dancing, her lips slightly parted. The streetlight caught the silver anklet on her ankle, making it gleam desire warred with fear in my gut, a confusing, sickening mix. Let's go back to the Airbnb, I said. I'm not feeling great. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Okay. The walk back was quiet that I kept glancing behind us, expecting to see the pale man following, but the streets were empty except for the occasional group of tourists. Our Airbnb was dark and cool when we let ourselves in. Chloe turned on a lamp in the living room, casting soft golden light across the furniture. Do you want some water or something? She asked. Yeah, thanks. While she was in the kitchen, I found myself staring at my reflection in the dark window. My face looked pale and strained, my eyes shadowed. Then, for just a second, I saw him standing behind me in the reflection. His hand was on my shoulder, cold even through the glass. I spun around, but there was no one there. Here, Chloe said, coming back into the room with a glass of water. She handed it to me, her fingers brushing against mine. You're really spooked, aren't you? I took a long drink of water. I don't know what's happening, that I feel like I'm losing my mind. She sat down on the couch beside me, her thigh pressing against mine. Talk to me, tell me what you've been seeing. So I did it. I told her about the pale man in the mirror shop, about seeing him reflected when he wasn't really there, about the way he seemed to be following us. That I told her about the mirror that showed her standing slightly off from where she really was. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, you know, in some cultures they believe mirrors can trap souls. Or that they show alternate realities. Thanks, that makes me feel much better, I said with a weak attempt at a joke. She smiled slightly. I'm just saying that maybe there's something to it. This is New Orleans. Stranger things have happened. She leaned closer, her face serious now. Mark, look at me. I met her eyes. They were dark in the dim light, full of concern and something else, something warmer. Whatever's happening, she said softly, we'll figure it out together, okay? Her hand came up to cup my cheek, her thumb stroking my skin. It was the most intimate gesture she'd ever made toward me, and for a moment, all the fear and confusion faded away, replaced by a different kind of tension. I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, tentative kiss. It was hungry, desperate, years of pent-up longing finally breaking free. She kissed me back just as fiercely, her hands tangling in my hair, pulling me closer. We stumbled toward her bedroom, leaving a trail of clothes behind us. In the dim light from the window, her body was pale and beautiful, all smooth curves and taut muscle. I kissed my way down her neck, her chest, her stomach, mapping her with my lips and hands. She gasped when I reached the silver anklet, my lips brushing against the delicate skin of